Introduction. There are places where time itself seems to stand still, places that whisper secrets only to those brave enough to listen. But in the shadows of the world, where darkness twists like tendrils through the cracks of the earth, there lies a tale far more unsettling. It is a story that begins with silence, the kind of silence that clings to the air, heavy with unspoken truths, the kind that makes your skin prickle and your heartbeat quicken. This is where our journey begins, in the forgotten edges of a land that has long been abandoned by hope. A forest stands at the edge of a crumbling kingdom, where the trees are twisted and gnarled, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. The ground is damp, covered in a blanket of fallen leaves that seem to absorb the light, leaving only a cold, oppressive darkness in their wake. Even the wind is reluctant to pass through, as if it fears the weight of the secrets it would carry with it. And yet, there is a path, a narrow, winding trail that seems to invite only the most reckless souls to venture deeper into the heart of this desolate wilderness. The air grows colder with every step you take. The silence thickens until even your own breath seems too loud. You can almost feel the eyes watching you, not from the trees, but from something far older, far more ancient. The forest is alive, but it is not the kind of life you understand. It is a place where memories are buried beneath the roots, and every stone, every whisper of wind is steeped in a history so dark that even the bravest dare not speak of it. And yet, there are those who wander into its depths, searching for answers to questions they should never ask. One such soul is a man named Victor, a figure lost to time, his face a canvas of regret and pain. He has come to the forest seeking redemption, though he doesn't yet know what it is that he truly seeks. His heart beats with a heavy rhythm, a constant reminder of the guilt that clings to him like a second skin. He was once a man of power, a ruler of men, but now, as he stands at the edge of this forgotten realm, all he can hear is the beating of his own heart, the pulse of his own failure. Victor moves forward, his footsteps soft but determined. His mind is a maze of fractured thoughts, each one echoing in the vast emptiness of the forest. What does he expect to find here? A way to undo the past? A path to forgiveness? Or is he simply running from something darker, something that has chased him for far too long? He doesn't know. All he knows is that the deeper he walks into the woods, the more the weight of his actions presses upon him, suffocating him. The trees loom overhead, casting long shadows that seem to stretch toward him, like the hands of the past reaching out to claim him. The ground beneath his feet is uneven, treacherous, but he presses on, driven by an unseen force. As he walks, the air grows heavier, thicker with something ancient and restless, as if the forest itself is awakening to his presence. A low, distant hum fills the air, faint at first, but growing louder, a sound that seems to resonate with his very soul. Victor halts, his breath caught in his throat. He is not alone. The hum turns to whispers, voices swirling around him, too soft to understand, but clear enough to stir something deep inside. His heart races as the ground shifts beneath him, the earth trembling in response to the voices. Something is coming, something ancient, something that knows him, perhaps better than he knows himself. A flash of movement catches his eye, a shadow flickering just out of reach. His hand instinctively reaches for the hilt of the sword at his side, but the grip feels cold, distant, as if the weapon no longer belongs to him. His fingers brush the hilt, but the tremor in his hand is not one of fear. It is the tremor of realization. He is no longer the man he once was. The shadows around him twist and writhe, and for a moment, Victor is unsure if they are moving toward him, or if it is he who is being pulled into them. The whispers grow louder, more insistent, as if the forest itself is calling out to him, beckoning him deeper into its heart. He feels the pull, an overwhelming force that tugs at his very soul. He knows he should turn back, but he cannot. Something or someone is waiting for him. With a breath that feels like a surrender, Victor takes another step forward, and the shadows consume him. The last thing he sees before the darkness closes in is the faint, glowing outline of something ahead, something he has been searching for, something that promises both answers and consequences. The path ahead is unclear, but one thing is certain. Victor has crossed a threshold, and there is no going back. In the depths of the forest, time has no meaning. The past and the future blur, and Victor is no longer certain of where the journey will take him, only that it will change him forever. The forest, alive with mystery and ancient power, waits to reveal its secrets. But at what cost? Only the brave or the desperate would dare to find out. This is a place of darkness and light, of betrayal and redemption, of whispered promises and forgotten regrets. And for Victor, the true test is just beginning. The beginning of the enchantment. Once there was a kingdom bathed in the warm glow of endless summers, a place where laughter echoed through the halls of the royal palace, and joy clung to the hearts of all who dwelled there. The king, Aldrich, was a ruler of wisdom and strength, his presence both reassuring and formidable. His queen, Ilara, was a woman of grace, her beauty matched only by her kindness. Together, they had 7 children, 7 lives entwined in love, each one as different as the seasons themselves. The eldest was Prince Tristan, bold and unyielding, his heart forged in the fires of courage. His younger brother, Prince Lucas, was thoughtful and sensitive, a soul attuned to the wonders of the world around him. Princess Evie, the only daughter among the boys, was a dreamer. Her eyes held the quiet, distant gleam of someone who saw the world not as it was, but as it could be, touched by something greater than the mortal realm. The other siblings, varied in age and temperament, filled the palace with their own unique gifts. Singers, scholars, and artists who kept the air light, even as the weight of their royal duties bore down upon them. But even in a kingdom so full of life, there are whispers of shadows, dark, unseen forces that move when the world sleeps, waiting for a time to strike. It was a night like no other when the winds shifted and everything changed. The night the enchantment began. It started with a dream shared by the three eldest brothers, Tristan, Lucas, and Leon. In the depths of their sleep, they found themselves in the heart of a forest, bathed in moonlight, a forest unlike any they had known. The trees whispered their names, calling them toward the depths of the unknown. They walked together, drawn by an unseen force. But as they ventured deeper into the woods, a chill began to settle in the air, a coldness that sank into their bones, a feeling of dread so palpable it seemed to crackle with the tension of a storm waiting to break. They had no choice but to follow. The path twisted unnaturally before them, leading them to a clearing where a figure stood. It was a woman, draped in a cloak of night, her face hidden in shadows. Her eyes gleamed with a strange, otherworldly light, and when she spoke, it was as though the very ground beneath them trembled with her words. "You are the ones who are destined to see the end," she said, her voice a melody that sent chills down their spines. "But beware, for the path you walk will cost you more than you can imagine." The brothers, in their youthful arrogance, did not understand the weight of her warning. They demanded answers, seeking the wisdom they believed would be granted by her cryptic words. And so she led them to the heart of the forest, where an ancient tree stood, its roots deep and gnarled, its bark twisted with age. The tree was alive, pulsing with power, and as they approached, it seemed to beckon them closer. It was then that the transformation began. The brothers, unable to resist, placed their hands upon the tree's bark. As their fingers made contact, a surge of energy coursed through them, powerful and overwhelming. In an instant, they were no longer the men they had been. Their bodies twisted and contorted, their forms shifting into something dark, something unnatural. They cried out, but their voices were no longer their own, their pleas for mercy swallowed by the magic that consumed them. When the magic receded, the brothers were gone. In their place stood figures, their eyes hollow and lifeless, their skin ashen and cold. The enchantment had claimed them, binding them to a fate from which there was no escape. At the palace, the king and queen waited anxiously for their son's return, but as the days passed, the silence grew unbearable. The once vibrant halls of the castle were now filled with an aching emptiness. The king searched the kingdom, sending his finest knights to find them, but it was as if the land itself had swallowed them whole. The queen, her heart heavy with grief, retreated into the solitude of her chambers, her mind consumed by the thought of what had happened to her children. And then there was Evie. She was the youngest of the royal children, and though she had once been full of the carefree laughter that echoed through the palace, she had become a shadow of her former self. The absence of her brothers weighed heavily upon her, and in her heart a gnawing emptiness grew, a void that no amount of comfort from her parents or siblings could fill. She would stand at the palace windows for hours, staring into the distance, as though waiting for something to come. something that would bring her answers, though she did not know what those answers would be. Evie's isolation only deepened with the passing years. The seasons changed, but the chill that gripped her heart remained, growing colder with each passing day. Her curiosity about the forest that had claimed her brothers grew, twisting like a vine around her soul. There were rumors, whispers in the dark corners of the castle, that the forest was cursed, that those who entered would never return. But Evie could not let go of the thought that something remained out there, something tied to her brothers, and something she had to find. She had heard the stories, of course, how her brothers had been lost to the woods, how the king and queen had searched in vain, and how the very land seemed to have turned its back on the royal family. But there was a flicker in Evie's eyes, a spark of defiance that refused to be extinguished by the fear that haunted the kingdom. She could not, would not, let the shadow of their disappearance claim her as it had claimed her family. She would find the truth no matter the cost. And so, as the winter months stretched on, Evie's thoughts turned more and more to the forest. The cold that settled in her chest seemed to mirror the frost that blanketed the land. Each day felt like a countdown, the weight of the unknown pressing on her, urging her forward. Her heart, though heavy with sorrow, beat with the quiet, determined rhythm of someone who would not give up, not until she understood the mystery that had taken her brothers, and perhaps would soon claim her as well. The enchantment had begun, and Evie was caught in its pull. Evie's journey begins. The days were long and the nights colder, each one stretching into the next, a monotonous cycle of grief and silence. Inside the palace, Evie's world had become a place of stillness. The vibrant laughter of her brothers, once a constant presence in her life, was now only a distant memory that seemed to fade with each passing day. Her life, once filled with playful chaos and the warmth of family, had grown painfully quiet, each empty hallway, each shadow reminding her of what had been lost. The weight of the absence pressed on her chest like a suffocating fog. But no matter how deeply she searched for comfort in the arms of her parents or the company of her remaining siblings, nothing seemed to ease the aching emptiness inside her. Her heart, once open and filled with the dreams of endless possibilities, had closed in on itself. The days seemed to blur, each one a repetition of the last. Evie would wander the gardens, watching the leaves fall in the wind, listening to the cold whispers of the trees. Yet she never felt truly alive. The world outside had become a cage, a reminder that she was no longer the carefree princess she had once been. Her once innocent curiosity had turned inward, consumed by the need to understand. Understand why her brothers had vanished, why the kingdom had become a place of mourning, why the cold seemed to reach deeper into her soul with each passing day. It wasn't just sorrow that she felt. It was a sense of suffocation, of being trapped in a life she no longer recognized. The love of her parents, though undeniable, felt distant, as though it was wrapped in a fog she could not penetrate. The walls of the castle, though grand and beautiful, now felt like a tomb, a place where time moved too slowly, and where she, despite her royal status, was no more than a ghost. Evie spent more and more time alone, her thoughts swirling with unanswered questions. It wasn't just the loss of her brothers that tormented her. It was the sense that something greater was at play. The more she tried to understand the mystery of their disappearance, the more she felt an unfamiliar tug in her chest, a pull toward something unknown, something that called to her with an urgency she could not ignore. It wasn't just a curiosity anymore. It was a compulsion, a need to find the truth, to seek out the source of the magic that had taken her brothers and made her world cold. And so, it was with a heavy heart and a mind full of uncertainty that Evie finally made the decision to leave. She knew the risks, knew the dangers that lay beyond the castle gates, but something inside her told her that this was the only way to uncover the truth. Her heart raced as she stood in front of the castle gates, her hand resting on the cold iron, her mind torn between the safety of the familiar and the unknown that called to her like a siren song. The warmth of the palace, the comfort of her parents' love, it all seemed like a distant dream now, a dream she could never return to. To step beyond the gates meant leaving behind everything she had known, stepping into the unknown, where the very air felt thick with the weight of magic and mystery. Evie hesitated, her breath catching in her throat. It was the hardest decision she had ever made, to leave the only world she had ever known. But in that moment, something shifted inside her. The fear, the doubt, they no longer held sway over her. The pull toward the woods, toward the mystery of what had taken her brothers, was too strong to resist. She could no longer live in the shadow of her grief. She had to face it, to understand it, even if it meant walking into the darkness alone. With a final, trembling breath, Evie stepped beyond the gates. The world outside was colder than she remembered, the air thick with an unsettling quiet. The roads were barren, the earth beneath her feet frozen, as if the land itself held its breath. Yet there was something else in the air, something electric, something magical, just beyond her reach. She could feel it, an invisible thread pulling her toward the heart of the forest, toward the place where her brothers had vanished. It wasn't long before she found herself standing at the edge of the woods, the trees towering above her like silent sentinels. Their branches were twisted, gnarled, their trunks dark and foreboding, as if they had been shaped by something older than time itself. The forest was silent, too silent, and for a moment Evie felt the familiar sting of fear in her chest. But then, as if in answer to her unspoken question, a soft breeze stirred the air, carrying with it the faintest scent of something sweet, something inviting. Evie stepped forward, her heart beating faster as the path before her seemed to open up, almost as though the forest was guiding her, urging her onward. The deeper she walked, the more the trees seemed to part, revealing a narrow cobblestone path hidden beneath a blanket of frost. The stones were old, worn smooth by centuries of use, and as her feet touched them, Evie felt a strange warmth spread through her, a sense of familiarity, as though she had walked this path before, in another life. Her curiosity, now fully awakened, urged her forward. The cobblestones led her deeper into the forest, where the trees began to thin, and the moonlight broke through the canopy above, casting eerie shadows on the ground. The air was thick with magic, and as she walked, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that eyes, unseen and unknown, were following her every move. It was both unsettling and exhilarating. And then, as she rounded a bend in the path, she saw it. A village nestled in a clearing, its houses small and made of stone, their roofs dusted with snow. It was a village like none she had ever seen, hidden away in the heart of the forest, its very existence a secret that the world had forgotten. The lights from the homes flickered softly in the night, and the air was filled with the faint sound of music, a tune that seemed to rise from the very earth itself. It was here, in this forgotten corner of the world, that Evie would find the first true hint of the magic that had claimed her brothers, and that would forever change her life. But what she didn't yet know was that this village, this hidden place of magic, was no mere sanctuary. It was the beginning of something far darker than she could have ever imagined. The fairy encounter. Evie stood frozen at the edge of the village, the sight before her so unexpected that her breath caught in her throat. She had entered a world unlike any she had ever known, a world that seemed to exist beyond the boundaries of her childhood stories, beyond the borders of the kingdom she had always known. The fairy village, nestled deep within the forest, was an ethereal realm, bathed in the soft, silvery glow of moonlight that filtered through the twisted branches above. The houses, made of stone and wood, looked as if they had grown from the very earth, their roofs dusted with a light coating of snow, and their windows glowing with warm, flickering lights. It was beautiful, too beautiful to be real. For a moment, Evie thought she had wandered into a dream, that the forest's magic had transported her to a world from which there would be no return. The air was thick with an unfamiliar scent, sweet, almost intoxicating, and the ground beneath her feet felt soft, as though the earth itself were alive, breathing. Her heart raced, a mix of wonder and disbelief swirling within her chest. This village, hidden in the heart of the forest, was unlike any place she had ever imagined. The silence of the woods had been replaced by the soft hum of life, the distant laughter of children, the rustling of wings, and the gentle murmur of voices in a language she could not understand. As she stepped forward, her eyes widened in awe, taking in the sights and sounds around her. The air shimmered, thick with magic, as the village's inhabitants emerged from their homes. Fairies with delicate wings that glowed faintly in the moonlight flitted between the trees, their laughter like the tinkling of tiny bells. They were small, no taller than a child, their faces youthful yet wise, their eyes gleaming with a strange knowingness. They wore garments of flowing silks and leaves, their hair cascading in long, shimmering strands, that seemed to float around them like a veil. The very ground beneath their feet seemed to bend and shift with their every step, as though the forest itself was responding to their presence. Evie felt a mix of awe and confusion welling up inside her. She had read stories of fairies when she was a child, but this was something altogether different. She had imagined them to be ethereal creatures, distant and unreachable, but the ones before her were so real, so alive, there was no mistaking it. This world, this place, was a living, breathing entity, and yet, despite the enchantment that surrounded her, Evie felt an unsettling sense of disconnection, as if she were an outsider who did not belong in this strange realm. One of the fairies with hair spun from silver moonlight and wings that shimmered like stardust approached her. Her eyes were a deep violet, a color so vivid that it almost seemed to glow. She smiled softly, and her voice was like the sound of wind through leaves. "You've come," the fairy said, her voice gentle, almost melodic. "We've been waiting for you." Evie felt a chill run through her at the words. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she took a cautious step forward, unsure of what to say, unsure of what she had stumbled upon. The fairy continued to smile, her gaze full of an ancient wisdom that sent a shiver down Evie's spine. "Your brothers," the fairy whispered, her voice barely audible above the of the village. "They are here, in this place, in a way you cannot yet understand." Evie's heart skipped a beat at the mention of her brothers. 1,000 questions flooded her mind. What did this fairy mean? Had they been here all along? Were they still alive? But before she could voice her thoughts, the fairy turned and drifted away, her wings fluttering lightly as she vanished into the shadows of the village. Evie stood there for a long moment, staring after her, her mind racing. There was something about the way the fairy had spoken, something that felt both comforting and terrifying all at once. Evie had come seeking answers, seeking the truth of her brother's disappearance. But now, as the fairy's words lingered in the air, she felt a growing unease. This place, this village, seemed to hold many secrets, secrets that were not easily understood. As she continued to explore the village, Evie couldn't shake the sense that she was being watched, that the fairies were observing her every move with an intensity that was both curious and wary. She felt their eyes on her as she passed, their gazes heavy with something unspoken. It was as if they knew more about her than she could comprehend, as if they were waiting for something, some catalyst to set everything into motion. The cobblestone path led her deeper into the heart of the village, where the air grew colder, the silence more profound. The fairies, once playful and light-hearted, had become still, their wings barely moving as they watched her. It was then that she realized that something was wrong. The magic that had once felt inviting, warm, now seemed to be pulsing with an undercurrent of tension, as if the very air was thick with unspoken warnings. A sudden rustling sound broke the stillness, and Evie spun around, her heart pounding in her chest. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a tall, slender fairy her wings dark like the night. Her face was solemn, her eyes sharp and cold. She regarded Evie with a gaze that seemed to pierce straight through her, as though she could see into her very soul. "You should leave," the fairy said, her voice low, almost harsh. "This place is not as it seems. There is darkness here, deeper than you know." Evie's pulse quickened. She didn't understand. She hadn't felt any danger, at least not until now. The fairy's words sent a ripple of doubt through her, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. Not yet. Not without answers. "What do you mean?" Evie asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What's happening here? Why are my brothers—" The dark-winged fairy raised a hand, silencing her. "Not everything is meant to be understood," she said, cryptically. "Some things are better left hidden. But you are too late. The path you walk now will lead you to the truth, and to something far more dangerous than you realize." Evie's heart thundered in her chest as the fairy disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind a chilling silence. She stood alone in the village, the weight of the warning hanging over her like a storm cloud. For the first time, she felt the full extent of the danger she had walked into. The village, with its beauty and magic, was not a place of peace. It was a place of secrets, of danger, and of forces far older and more powerful than she could comprehend. And now she was caught in its web. The unfolding prophecy. As the eerie silence of the fairy village settled around her, Evie's mind raced, her heart thundering in her chest. The cryptic warning of the dark-winged fairy echoed in her mind, unsettling her more than she cared to admit. There was something undeniably dangerous about the village, about the fairies themselves, and yet, deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had come here for a reason far greater than she could understand. The revelation had come swiftly, like the first crack of thunder before a storm. The fairies, with their radiant wings and ancient eyes, had spoken to her as though they already knew her story. She was not just another wanderer, lost in the woods. No, she was something more, something destined, something they had been waiting for. "You are the one," the silver-haired fairy had said, her eyes glowing with an intensity that sent a shiver down Evie's spine. "You are the one who will break the curse." Evie's breath caught in her throat. Her brothers, her dear, lost brothers, had been trapped in a curse, one that had silenced their laughter and kept them from returning home for years. But what did this fairy mean? Could she truly be the key to their salvation? Or had she too been drawn into a web spun by ancient powers far beyond her comprehension? "The prophecy," the fairy continued, her voice a soft murmur, as though speaking of something long buried in the sands of time, "has been waiting for you. The curse that binds your brothers is tied to the blood of your blood, and only the one chosen can shatter the chains that hold them." Evie felt a cold chill sweep over her. She had never believed in prophecies or magic, at least not until now. The village, the fairies, the strange pull of the woods. It was all starting to feel like a dream. one that was slipping away faster than she could grasp. Yet, standing here now, with the weight of their words pressing down upon her, Evie realized that this wasn't some fantastical tale. This was real. "You have been marked," the fairy whispered, "the same way the curse marked your brothers. It is your fate to face the trials of the woods, to unravel the secrets of the past, and to set them free. Only you have the power to undo what was done." A sense of dread washed over her. The weight of the words seemed impossible to bear. How could she, just a young girl, isolated for years within the castle walls, bear such a responsibility? How could she, with her fragile heart and mind, stand against a curse as old as the forest itself? But before she could protest, another fairy, a tall, stoic figure cloaked in dark moss, stepped forward, her gaze piercing and sharp. Her wings were dark, almost black, and as she spoke, her voice held the gravity of ancient knowledge. "There will be tests," the dark fairy intoned, her eyes never leaving Evie's face. "Each will bring you closer to the truth, but each will also bring you closer to the edge. The woods will not give up its secrets easily. You will face trials of strength, of will, and of soul. Do not think the path will be kind. It will be a struggle. The price of failure is more than you can imagine." Evie's stomach twisted in knots, the fear crawling up her spine like ice. She wanted to refuse, to turn back and flee into the safety of the castle, where life was predictable and controlled. But a part of her, the same part that had longed for adventure, for answers, for the return of her brothers, pushed her forward. She couldn't walk away now. The truth had been revealed, and there was no turning back. "You will not face these trials alone," the silver-haired fairy said, her gaze softening for the briefest moment. "But know this, the cost of failure is great. Each test will demand something from you, something you may not be able to give." The air grew thick with tension, as if the very forest were holding its breath, waiting for her to decide. Evie swallowed hard, her mind whirling with conflicting thoughts. She didn't know if she was ready for what lay ahead, if she could truly undo the curse that had bound her brothers. She had never been trained for such a task, never prepared for this kind of journey. But she couldn't ignore the call that had led her here, the pull of destiny that tugged at her soul. The village, the fairies, the trials, all of it was part of something greater. And though the fear gnawed at her insides, Evie knew that if she didn't face this challenge, if she didn't try, then her brothers would remain lost forever. She couldn't let that happen. "I'll do it," Evie whispered, her voice shaking but steady. "I'll face the trials." The fairies nodded solemnly, their expressions unreadable. "Very well," the moss-clad fairy said, her tone firm. "Then your first trial begins now." Before Evie could respond, the ground beneath her feet shifted, and the air seemed to hum with an ancient power. The village around her blurred, the soft moonlight fading as shadows stretched long and deep. A path appeared before her, winding through the forest, leading her deeper into the unknown. The fairies stepped back, their eyes filled with silent anticipation. "The first test," the silver-haired fairy said, her voice carrying an unsettling weight, "is one of the mind. You must navigate the labyrinth of echoes. You will hear your greatest fears, your deepest regrets, and you must resist the temptation to listen to them." A cold, sharp wind swept through the trees, and Evie shuddered. The labyrinth of echoes. It sounded like a place designed to break her, to twist her mind until she was lost to herself. But there was no choice now. She had promised to face the trials, and she would. With a deep breath, Evie stepped forward, the path before her seeming to stretch endlessly into the darkness. The fairies' voices faded behind her, and she was left alone with only the sound of her own heartbeat thudding in her chest. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of the prophecy settling onto her shoulders like a stone. As the trees closed in around her, a voice called from the depths of the forest, a voice that sounded like her own, but twisted and distorted. "Are you sure you want to continue? Are you strong enough to face what lies ahead?" Evie paused, her breath catching in her throat. The trials had begun, and with them, the dark journey that would determine the fate of her brothers, and perhaps even her own soul. The first test. Evie's heart hammered in her chest as she stepped into the darkened path of the labyrinth of echoes. The air was thick with an ancient, oppressive energy that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her own heartbeat. The trees loomed above her like silent sentinels, their twisted branches reaching out like fingers, waiting to trap her within their grasp. This was not just the wood she had wandered through as a child. No, this was a different world altogether. A world teeming with danger, mystery, and magic that she could barely begin to comprehend. The silver-haired fairy's words echoed in her mind. "Gather the rarest of ingredients. Only then can you begin to break the curse." These words were her only guidance, and with them came an overwhelming sense of duty. She had no choice but to move forward. With each step, the path grew more convoluted. The earth beneath her feet seemed to shift and change, as though the very ground was alive and conscious. Evie paused, her breath shallow, trying to calm the rising panic that clawed at her chest. She had been raised within the safety of the castle walls, never once stepping outside the boundaries of the familiar. Now she was in the heart of an unknown world, with only herself to rely on. The task ahead was daunting, but Evie pushed forward, her resolve hardening with each step. The fairies had told her that the task she faced was one of gathering magical ingredients, rare items that could only be found deep within the woods. They didn't explain why these ingredients were necessary to break the curse, or how she would find them. But Evie knew. This was her only chance to save her brothers, to bring them back. The deeper she went into the woods, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. A cold mist began to roll in from the trees, creeping over the ground like a living thing. The shadows grew darker, and the sounds of the forest seemed to vanish, leaving only a silence that was almost deafening. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, watching her every move. Suddenly she heard a sound, a rustling in the underbrush. Her heart skipped a beat as her eyes darted to the source of the noise. A pair of glowing yellow eyes met, hers through the thick shadows, followed by the low growl of something large and predatory. Evie's stomach twisted in fear, but she stood her ground. She wasn't going to run. Not now. The creature emerged slowly from the mist, a massive wolf, its fur slick and dark, like a shadow-given form. Its teeth were bared, its eyes burning with hunger. But there was something wrong with it. The way it moved wasn't natural. It seemed to glide rather than walk, its claws barely touching the ground. This was no ordinary beast. It was a creature of the woods, a guardian of the dark magic that resided here. Evie's breath caught in her throat. The wolf let out another growl, stepping closer. It was circling her now, its glowing eyes never leaving hers. She could feel its gaze like a heavy weight pressing down on her, trying to force her to break, but she wouldn't. She couldn't. She took a deep breath, focusing on the ancient magic that ran through the air around her. She had no idea how to control it, but the fairies had told her she was connected to this world. You must face your trials alone, they had said. And this, she realized, was the beginning. The first test was not just about finding the ingredients. It was about facing her fears, about standing firm in the face of the unknown. The wolf lunged, but before it could reach her, Evie instinctively raised her arm, her palm facing outward. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a rush of energy, the air around her seemed to crackle with power. The wolf paused, its fur bristling as if repelled by an invisible force. Evie could feel the energy swirling around her, rising from deep within her soul, mingling with the magic of the forest. The creature snarled and backed away, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it circled her again, the tension thick in the air. Evie's mind raced, desperately trying to figure out what to do. The fairies had not given her instructions on how to defeat the dangers of the woods, only that she must pass through them. Focus, Evie told herself, remembering the silver-haired fairy's words. Focus on the magic. Taking a step forward, she lifted her hand again, this time focusing with all her might. The energy around her began to solidify, her connection to the forest deepening. A faint light began to glow at her fingertips, soft but steady, like the light of the moon through the trees. With a final push, Evie thrust her palm forward. The wolf hesitated, its eyes narrowing in confusion as the magic washed over it, shimmering like silver dust in the night. The creature let out a strangled whine and backed away, its body flickering in and out of existence like a phantom. Finally, with a growl of frustration, it vanished into the mist, leaving Evie standing alone once more. She exhaled sharply, her legs trembling beneath her. She had done it, but her relief was short-lived. The danger wasn't over. In fact, she could feel it. Something darker, something far more insidious, was watching her, and it was coming closer. Evie pushed forward, the path winding deeper into the woods. The trees seemed to close in around her, their twisted branches blocking out the light. The air was thick with a sense of impending doom, as though the woods were aware of her every move, and they were not pleased. The further she went, the more the woods seemed to change. The ground beneath her feet turned slick and treacherous, and the whispers of the trees grew louder, like a chorus of voices, speaking in a language she couldn't understand. Shadows danced just beyond her sight, and strange, unearthly creatures moved in the corners of her vision. Evie's heart raced as she pressed on. She had to find the ingredients, whatever they were, and complete the task. But the woods were playing with her, pushing her to her limits, testing her in ways she couldn't fathom. And through it all, the sense of being pursued, of something lurking just beyond her sight, never left her. It was clear now. The woods were alive, and they were not to be trusted. But there was no turning back. The first test had only just begun. The magical transformation. Evie's connection to the fairies grew deeper with each passing day. What had once been an encounter full of awe and uncertainty now felt like an unfolding destiny. She began to understand the forest in ways she never thought possible. At first, the fairies had seemed distant, their presence as ethereal as the moonlight filtering through the trees. But as she ventured deeper into their world, helping them with small tasks, gathering enchanted herbs, repairing shimmering pathways, and tending to the ancient trees, Evie felt an undeniable bond forming between herself and these mysterious creatures. In the quiet of the forest, she listened to their stories, each one rich with the weight of history. The fairies spoke of a time before the curse had settled upon the land, a time when the world had been in perfect harmony. They spoke of the moon's blessing, the elemental forces, and the delicate balance that had been shattered when the king's sons vanished. Through their eyes, Evie saw the world not as it was now, but as it had once been, alive with magic and wonder, free from the shadow of the curse. Every conversation, every moment spent in their company, brought her closer to understanding her role in the land's troubled fate. The fairies taught her about the energies that flowed through the woods, about the delicate balance between light and dark, life and death. They spoke of the power that lived within her, of the magic she had yet to fully understand. And as Evie listened, she felt the stirrings of something ancient and powerful awakening within her. But the trials were far from over. The task of gathering the ingredients had led her deeper into the labyrinth of the woods, further into a world where time seemed to slow, where the lines between dreams and reality blurred. And yet, with each step she took, the world around her began to shift. The winter's grip, which had held the land in its cold, unrelenting embrace for so long, began to loosen. At first, it was subtle, an unfurling leaf here, a flower blooming there. But as Evie ventured further into the heart of the woods, the changes became more pronounced. The once silent trees began to murmur, their leaves rustling with the soft sound of life returning. The air, once thick with frost, now carried the scent of budding flowers and fresh earth. With every magical ingredient she collected, the woods seemed to breathe with her. Each flower she touched, each stone she gathered, felt like a piece of the puzzle falling into place. The more she helped, the more she understood. The curse that bound her brothers was not just a spell. It was an echo of the land's suffering, a manifestation of the imbalance that had been caused so many years ago. As Evie performed these small tasks, she began to feel the land healing in tandem with her journey. But not all was as it seemed. The deeper she ventured, the more the woods revealed its hidden secrets. There were places where the sunlight never touched, where shadows clung to the earth like ancient memories. In these darker corners, Evie encountered creatures she had never seen before. Beings born from the deepest parts of the earth, their forms shifting between light and shadow, their eyes glowing with secrets long buried. One such encounter took place at the edge of a forgotten glen. The air was thick with a strange, almost oppressive energy. As Evie stepped into the clearing, she felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up, a chill creeping down her spine. Standing before her, cloaked in the twilight shadows, was an ancient fairy, her skin like the bark of a 1,000-year-old oak, her wings shimmering with the dust of ages. She was a creature of mystery, her eyes glowing with an unsettling intensity. "You've come far, child." The fairy's voice was like the whisper of wind through the leaves, soft but with an undertone of authority. "But the path you walk is not a simple one. The curse you seek to undo is ancient, and it is tied to the very soul of this land. You cannot break it with the ingredients alone." Evie's heart raced as she stepped forward, eager to hear what this ancient being had to say. "What do you mean?" "The fairies. They said the curse could be undone if I found the right ingredients." The ancient fairy smiled, a smile full of sorrow and wisdom. "The curse is not a mere spell, child. It is the reflection of the land's suffering. It binds your brothers because they are bound to this land, its pain, its loss, its sorrow. The curse you seek to break can only be undone when the land itself is healed." Evie's mind whirled as she tried to comprehend the gravity of what the fairy was saying. Her brothers, the 7 princes, were tied to the very soul of the land. Their fate, then, was not just a product of dark magic, but a manifestation of the grief and sorrow that had plagued the kingdom for so long. "You must understand," the fairy continued, "the land's wounds run deep. Every step you take brings you closer to the truth, but it also brings you closer to danger. There are forces at play here, forces older than even I, and they will stop at nothing to ensure the curse remains." Evie's chest tightened as she realized the scope of what lay ahead. This was no simple quest. It was a battle for the very heart of the world she had known. As she stood in the glen, the weight of the prophecy pressed down on her. The realization that she was not just fighting for her brothers, but for the future of the kingdom itself. The ancient fairy's eyes glimmered with something. Pity, perhaps, or something darker. "The land is changing, Evie. The winter is fading, yes, but that does not mean the curse is lifting. The true test lies ahead. Do not be deceived by what you see. The deeper you go, the more the magic will shape you. It will test your heart and your soul, child. It will transform you. Evie's breath caught in her throat. A transformation. What did that mean? Could she even survive such a change? The fairy's gaze softened for a moment, and she placed a hand gently on Evie's shoulder. You are not alone, Evie. The land is with you, as are the fairies. But remember, every choice you make will shape the future. Tread carefully. With that, the ancient fairy faded into the shadows, leaving Evie standing alone in the glen, her heart heavy with the burden of the prophecy. The air around her shimmered with the magic of the land, and for the first time, she realized that she was not just a traveler in this world, she was becoming part of it. As Evie continued on her journey, the woods whispered around her, the magic of the land flowing through her veins. She could feel it now, the magic, the power, and the transformation that was taking place within her. It was as if she was becoming something more, something that was both part of the land and something beyond it. But as she moved forward, the shadows lingered, and the weight of the prophecy pressed down on her with ever-increasing force. The trials were far from over. In fact, they were only just beginning. The second test, the Lake of Tears. The path was darker now, the air thicker with the scent of wet earth and the distant whisper of something ancient. Evie had grown accustomed to the strange, pulsing magic of the woods, but this was different. The air seemed heavier, pressing against her chest with each step, as though the very forest held its breath, watching her, waiting. She had been given the second test, the journey to the Lake of Tears, a mystical body of water where the memories of the kingdom's lost history were said to lie dormant, hidden beneath its surface. The fairies had spoken little about the lake, only that it was both a place of revelation and danger. They warned her of the lake's power, how it could unravel the deepest recesses of one's soul and make them face truths they were not prepared for. It was said that those who sought its depths were often lost to their own memories, trapped forever in the visions it brought to life. As Evie walked deeper into the forest, the trees thinned, and the soft murmur of the woods gave way to an eerie silence. The path before her twisted and turned, eventually opening up into a small clearing, where the moonlight reflected off the glassy surface of the lake. The water gleamed like liquid silver. The ripples it created faint, as if the very lake itself was holding its breath. It was beautiful, hauntingly so. But as she stood there at the edge, Evie felt an overwhelming sense of foreboding, as if the lake itself knew what she had come for and was waiting for her to make the first move. With a shudder, she stepped closer to the water's edge, feeling the chill in the air intensify. The stillness of the lake was deceptive. There was a dark energy within it, an energy that beckoned her, pulling at the very core of her being. She had been warned. This place was not just a test of her courage, but of her heart. With trembling hands, Evie dipped her fingers into the water. The coldness of the liquid sent a shock through her, and as she touched the surface, a wave of emotions flooded her mind. The memories of her kingdom's forgotten past began to surface, like ghosts long buried, and the images were vivid, too vivid. Her brothers, her 7 brothers, appeared before her not as she remembered them, but as they had been the day they disappeared, their faces twisted in anguish, their eyes empty, trapped in the endless cycle of the curse. They looked lost, each one bound to the forest in some way, as though their spirits had been absorbed by the land itself. Their voices echoed in her mind, and she could hear their pleas, their cries for help, their calls for her to save them, but it was as if they were too far away, beyond her reach. Tears welled up in her eyes as the memories shifted, and she saw flashes of the kingdom before the curse took hold. A time of laughter and love, when her family had been whole. The kingdom had been a place of joy, of light, and of peace. But the water did not stop there. It dug deeper, showing her the moment the curse had begun to take hold, the tragedy that had led to her brother's disappearance, the terrible price the kingdom had paid, the weight of it all, the grief, the loss, the guilt, pressed down on her chest, making it harder to breathe. She could feel herself becoming consumed by the visions, her heart heavy with the pain of the past. Each image, each memory felt like a wound reopening, pulling her deeper into the darkness of the lake. She had to pull herself away, but the water held her fast, and she couldn't break free. The more she struggled, the deeper she fell into the depths of the lake's power. And then came the voice of the lake's guardian. It was low, guttural, and filled with a terrible authority. You seek answers, but some truths are not meant to be found. Some memories are better left buried. Evie's heart raced as the voice echoed through the clearing. She tried to pull her hand from the water, but it was as if the lake had a mind of its own, grasping her like 1,000 unseen hands. The water began to swirl, its surface darkening, becoming an inky black void. The lake had taken hold of her, pulling her into its depths, and she could feel herself sinking, dragged down into a place where time and memory no longer mattered. Release her, Evie cried out, struggling, her voice trembling with fear and desperation. The guardian's laughter filled the air, cold and cruel. You are not strong enough, child. The lake holds the past, and the past will never let you go. With a surge of panic, Evie fought against the pull, her body thrashing in the water, but it was like trying to fight the tide. The memories continued to swirl around her, her brothers' faces, their pain, their sorrow, all of it suffocating her. She felt as though she was losing herself, her own identity blurring with the images of the past, consumed by the grief and guilt that had never been her own. Then, in the midst of the chaos, a soft light flickered through the water, a glimmer of something familiar, something that gave her strength. It was the warmth of the fairies' magic, calling to her, urging her to remember who she was. Evie grasped onto that light, reaching for it with everything she had, pulling herself toward it like a lifeline. Focus, Evie, the voice of the fairy echoed in her mind. This is not the end. You are stronger than this. With one final, desperate, effort, Evie broke free from the water's grasp, gasping for air as she stumbled back from the lake. The surface of the water remained still, but the air around her was thick with the echo of the guardian's words. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she could feel the weight of the visions lingering in her mind. But she had survived. She had faced the lake's challenge and come through it stronger, more determined than ever. The pain of the past still lingered, but it no longer consumed her. She knew now that she was not only fighting for her brothers, but for the future of the kingdom, and she would not let the darkness swallow her. As she stood on the shores of the Lake of Tears, Evie felt a surge of resolve. The lake had shown her the past, but it was the future she had to focus on. The curse was not just a force of magic. It was a force of memory, of history, and of the land's suffering. She would break it, no matter the cost. And with that resolve, she turned from the lake and walked back into the woods, ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. The final test. Confrontation with the sorcerer. The woods had grown darker, the air colder. Each step Evie took seemed to lead her deeper into an abyss, the shadows closing in around her like a living entity, suffocating her. The once familiar trees now twisted unnaturally, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, as if they too were complicit in the curse that had ravaged her family. The weight of the final test pressed on her chest, making it hard to breathe, each heartbeat thudding in her ears like a drum of war. She had reached the end of her journey, but the path forward was not one of triumph. No, this was the moment she had dreaded. The confrontation with the one responsible for the curse, the shadow that had cast its dark spell over her brothers, her kingdom, and her very soul. The sorcerer. Her feet faltered as the air shifted, thickening with an unnatural energy. The ground beneath her trembled, and the whispers of the forest grew louder, more frantic. She could feel it, the presence of the sorcerer. His dark magic filled the air, a suffocating weight that wrapped around her mind like tendrils of smoke. He was near. Then, from the depths of the shadows, he emerged, a figure cloaked in darkness, tall and imposing, with eyes that burned like molten fire. His face was hidden beneath a hood, but Evie could feel the malevolence emanating from him, like a wave crashing over her. The sorcerer was no mere mortal. He was a force of darkness incarnate, a being forged from the fears, the regrets, and the nightmares of the kingdom itself. Evie, the sorcerer's voice rang out, smooth and mocking, a hiss that seemed to crawl beneath her skin. The little princess who thinks she can save her family. How quaint. His words hit her like a blow, but she stood her ground, forcing herself to meet his gaze, even as her heart hammered in her chest. She had come too far to turn back now. "You've brought nothing but suffering," Evie spat, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her gut. "You're the one who cursed my family, my kingdom. You're the one who stole my brothers from me." The sorcerer laughed, a low guttural sound that echoed through the trees. "Oh, how naive you are. You think you understand the depths of the curse. You have no idea what I've done or why. I did what was necessary, child. Your family's downfall was inevitable. It was only a matter of time. The ground shifted beneath her feet, and Evie's senses sharpened. The sorcerer's words were not just manipulations. They were truths wrapped in lies. She could feel it, the darkness crawling beneath her skin, whispering that all she had fought for was futile. It was his power, his control, infecting her thoughts. You can't win, the sorcerer said, his voice a soft purr now, like a serpent coiling around her mind. You've already lost. Your brothers are beyond saving. You're nothing more than a child who dreams of saving a kingdom that has already been consumed by the darkness. Evie's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She could feel the weight of his words, the cruel truth that lingered like a bitter taste in her mouth. But she could also feel something else, the power of the fairies, the magic she had learned to harness, the love for her family that burned within her heart. I don't care what you say, she said, her voice low but filled with a determination she hadn't known she possessed. I will stop you. I will save my brothers, and I will break this curse. The sorcerer's eyes glowed brighter, like two burning coals, and his smile twisted into something grotesque. Then you will have to face me, little girl. You will have to fight the darkness inside yourself before you can hope to defeat me. The air around them crackled with energy, and suddenly the sorcerer raised his hand, sending a wave of black magic toward her. It was like a storm, a torrent of shadows that threatened to swallow her whole. Evie's heart raced as she threw her hands up, summoning the magic she had learned from the fairies, the light that had guided her through the darkness. But it wasn't enough. The sorcerer's power was overwhelming, like an avalanche crashing down on her. She could feel her strength waning, her magic fading beneath the weight of his darkness. Her knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, gasping for breath. The sorcerer's laughter echoed in her ears, a cruel reminder of her helplessness. You're nothing, he hissed, just like your family. Weak, helpless. The kingdom was always doomed, and so are you. But Evie refused to surrender. She had come too far, fought too hard to let the darkness consume her. With every ounce of strength she had left, she pushed herself up from the ground, her hands glowing with the light of the fairies. The pain in her chest was unbearable, the weight of the curse pressing down on her like an invisible force. But she didn't care. She wasn't fighting just for herself. She was fighting for her brothers, for her family, for the future of her kingdom. Leave them alone, she shouted, her voice raw with emotion. I won't let you win. With a final cry, she unleashed all the magic she had left, a burst of light that shattered the sorcerer's dark magic, sending it spiraling into the air. The sorcerer's expression twisted into one of rage, his dark power swirling around him like a storm. But Evie's light was brighter, stronger, fueled by love and determination. The sorcerer screamed, his form disintegrating into the very shadows he had summoned. The darkness that had consumed the woods began to recede, the oppressive weight lifting from the air. Evie's breath came in ragged gasps as she stood, her body trembling from the effort, but her heart soared. She had done it. She had defeated the sorcerer, but the victory came at a cost. As the sorcerer's dark magic faded, Evie felt something inside her tear. Her strength, her connection to the fairy magic, seemed to dissipate, leaving her hollow, empty. She had given everything to defeat him, and now there was nothing left. She sank to her knees, exhaustion pulling her under. Her heart ached, the weight of the sacrifice sinking in. She had won, yes, but the battle had cost her more than she could bear. As the woods began to heal around her, she knew the price of her victory. The sorcerer was gone, but so was a part of her. She had saved her family, but at the cost of her own soul. But she had triumphed, and in the end, that was enough. The awakening of the kingdom, the air, once thick with the cold grip of winter, now felt different. The winds whispered a soft sigh, as though the world was finally exhaling, freed from an age-long suffocation. Evie stood at the heart of the woods, her hands trembling, her body sore from the immense battle she had fought against the sorcerer. Yet, despite the exhaustion that clung to her like a heavy cloak, she felt a surge of warmth radiating from deep within the earth. The curse had been broken. The first true rays of sunlight broke through the veil of clouds overhead, casting their golden glow upon the once dead trees. Slowly, the frost began to melt, the ice that had blanketed the land for so long, turning into rivers of crystal clear water. A faint scent of spring filled the air, delicate and sweet, as if the very earth was waking up from a long, troubled slumber. Evie blinked against the brightness, still reeling from the battle, but the change in the world around her made her heart leap. She had done it. She had broken the curse, shattered the spell that had bound her brothers, her family, her kingdom for so many years. The pain, the suffering, everything she had endured was finally coming to an end. Suddenly, a rush of movement stirred the air behind her, a flash of familiar faces, faces she had not seen in what felt like a lifetime. The first of her brothers, Ethan, appeared, his eyes wide with confusion and wonder, as the warm breeze wrapped around him. Then, one by one, the others followed. Lucas, Thomas, and the twins, Daniel and Alexander, all emerging from the shadows of the woods, blinking as if they, too, were just waking from a deep sleep. Evie. Ethan's voice cracked with disbelief as he took a tentative step toward her, his eyes searching hers for some sign of truth. Is it really you? She could hardly believe it herself. Her heart clenched in her chest, and the tears she had held back for so long now spilled freely down her cheeks. For so long she had believed they were lost to her forever, trapped in the curse, never to return. But now they were here. Yes, she whispered, stepping forward to embrace him. The moment their arms wrapped around each other, she felt a warmth unlike anything she had ever known. It was as if the very fibers of her being were knitting back together, healing in ways she never imagined possible. For all the suffering, for all the years of isolation, this moment, this reunion, was worth everything. One by one, the others gathered around her, enveloping her, in their embrace. There were no words at first, only the sound of sobs and laughter, the clinking of armor and the rustling of cloaks as they held on to each other tightly, unwilling to let go. They were whole again, alive, real, free from the curse that had bound them for so long. "I can't believe it's real," Thomas said softly, his voice thick with emotion as he gazed at the thawing landscape around them. "It's like everything's changing. Everything is waking up." Indeed, the transformation was unmistakable. As Evie looked around, she could see the signs of renewal everywhere. The snow had melted away, leaving the earth soft and fertile. Green shoots of grass poked through the once frozen ground, and the trees, once barren and skeletal, were now budding with life. The flowers that had long been stifled by the unyielding winter began to bloom, their vibrant colors painting the world in a breathtaking display of rebirth. But it wasn't just the land that had changed. The air itself felt lighter, infused with the promise of new beginnings. The once stagnant river, frozen solid for so many years, now flowed with clarity, its waters gleaming as they rushed toward the distant horizon. And then came the people, the citizens of the kingdom, emerging from their homes, their eyes wide with wonder and disbelief as they stepped into the sunlight for the first time in years. They looked around, awestruck, unsure if the change they witnessed was real. But as they gazed upon the land that had once been barren, they could see the truth unfolding before them. A cheer broke out from the crowd, and it spread like wildfire through the kingdom. People began to embrace, laughing and crying, as though they too had been released from some dark prison. The once dead kingdom was coming back to life, and with it, the hope of a future long thought lost. Evie watched as her family, now whole, again shared in the joy of the people around them. Her parents, her mother, whose face had been lined with the sorrow and fear for so many years, and her father, whose stoic expression softened with relief, came forward to join them. Her mother's eyes glistened with tears as she enveloped Evie in a tight, trembling hug. "Thank you," her mother whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for bringing them back, for bringing us back." Evie's heart swelled with emotion. It had been her journey, her trials, but it was their strength, their love, that had carried her through it all. She had not done this alone. They had all been a part of this, every step, every sacrifice. But even as she embraced her family, a part of her heart remained heavy. The curse had been lifted, the winter had broken, but she had given so much of herself to reach this point. She had saved them all, but the cost was a part of her soul. There was a deep ache, a hollow space within her that nothing could fill. The victory had been bittersweet. The people gathered in the square continued to cheer, their voices rising in a triumphant chorus that echoed through the streets, filling the air with warmth and celebration. And as Evie stood there, surrounded by her family, watching the kingdom come alive before her eyes, she realized something. No matter the cost, no matter the sacrifices, this was her victory. The kingdom was reborn. The curse had been broken, And for the first time in so long, Evie allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future, one that was filled with light, with love, and with the hope of new beginnings. And as the sun set over the once frigid land, casting its golden glow upon the newly awakened kingdom, Evie knew that the journey was only just beginning. There would be more challenges, more obstacles, but for now she could rest. The kingdom had been saved, and for this moment, that was enough. Conclusion. Evie's new beginning. The village, once frozen in the grip of an eternal winter, now buzzed with the vibrancy of life. The streets, which had long been empty and covered with a heavy layer of snow, were filled with laughter and music. Villagers moved about, decorating their homes with flowers in full bloom, their faces lit with joy and hope. The scent of freshly baked bread and the sound of children's voices echoed through the air, as if the entire village had come alive after a long, desolate sleep. Evie stood at the edge of the village, watching the celebrations unfold. Her heart swelled with a bittersweet pride. The curse had been broken, the land was thawing, and her brothers, her family, were with her once more. The warmth of the sun on her face, the gentle breeze that carried the scent of spring, all reminded her of the sacrifices that had brought her to this moment. The pain of the journey still lingered in her heart, but it was now tempered with a deep sense of fulfillment, of knowing that she had played a part in saving her kingdom, her family, and the very land itself. The villagers, grateful for the return of the seasons, began to recognize Evie's role in their salvation. The elder women smiled at her from their doorways, nodding with quiet approval. Children ran up to her, offering bouquets of flowers they had picked from the newly blooming fields, their innocent eyes shining with admiration. Even the elders who had once feared the magic in the woods now looked at her with respect and awe. She had not only freed them from the curse, but had also bridged the gap between their world and the world of the fairies. Evie's heart swelled with a quiet joy as she accepted their gestures, yet she could not fully lose herself in the celebration. Her journey had been long and treacherous, and though the immediate danger was over, there was still a part of her that felt disconnected from the world around her. The fairy world, with its wonders and its mysteries, had become a part of her, and she couldn't fully step away from it, no matter how much she tried. It was not a choice she regretted, though. In the days following the defeat of the Sorcerer, the fairies had welcomed her into their world in a way she had never expected. She had helped them heal their land, learned their secrets, and formed bonds with them that went beyond mere magic. The fairies, who had once seemed so distant and otherworldly, were now her kin. They had shown her the depth of the land's power and the beauty of its ancient magic. Yet, despite the enchantment that called to her, Evie found that her heart remained divided. She could not abandon her family, her kingdom. There was still work to be done. The land needed time to heal. The people needed their rulers. And she needed to help rebuild what had been lost. But the magic of the woods, the call of the fairies, would always remain in her heart. It was a part of her now, just as much as her love for her family. As the days turned to weeks, Evie found a balance between both worlds. She would spend her mornings helping her family with the kingdom's recovery, overseeing the rebuilding of homes and the tending of crops. But by the afternoon, she would wander to the woods, visiting the fairies and continuing her lessons in magic and healing. In the evenings, she would sit by the fire with her brothers, sharing stories of her adventures and the lessons she had learned. It was not an easy life, straddling two worlds that were so different, but it was her life, and it brought her a sense of peace. She was both part of the human world and part of the magical realm, and in that balance, she had found her purpose. The more time passed, the more Evie came to realize that her journey had not just been about saving her brothers or her kingdom. It had been about saving herself. The trials she had faced had forced her to confront her fears, her doubts, and her own limitations. She had learned to trust herself, to believe in her own strength, and to embrace the unknown. The girl who had once been timid and unsure was no longer the same. She had grown into someone capable of standing on her own, of facing the darkness without fear, of embracing both light and shadow. Her heart was full, not with the sense of victory, but with something deeper, something more lasting. She had found her place in the world, a place where she could be both a daughter of the kingdom and a child of the fairy world. She had learned that magic wasn't just in spells or enchantments. It was in the courage to face the unknown, in the strength to overcome the impossible, and in the willingness to open your heart to both love and loss. As she stood in the heart of the village watching the world bloom around her, Evie felt a deep sense of closure. The curse had been broken, the kingdom had been saved, and her family had been reunited. But more than that, she had discovered the power within herself to change the world around her. She had discovered that the greatest magic of all was the magic of the human spirit, the ability to endure, to heal, and to transform. Evie's journey had come to an end, but the story of her life was just beginning. She no longer needed to search for answers or for her place in the world. She had found it, and as the sun set on the village, casting a golden glow over the land, Evie knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them, because she had become something far greater than she had ever imagined. She had become the heart of the kingdom, a bridge between two worlds, and a symbol of hope for all who believed in the power of magic and the strength of the human soul. And so, Evie's new beginning began, not with a grand proclamation, but with a quiet understanding that the journey had shaped her into someone capable of shaping the world itself. The kingdom was healing, the magic was flowing, and the future was hers to create.